Do you want me to do Con Air or do you?
I don't mind doing an intro. I've written stuff down. Unless, are you married to what you've written?
No, not really, no.
Right, okay. Daddy, my 5-year-old started in that social media favourite baiting way. Daddy, we live in a time of great macroeconomic inequality. The gap in prosperity between the richest and poorest increasing exponentially, and more people living in poverty than at any point in history. Daddy, if you had $75 million to spend on absolutely anything, what would be the fiscally and morally responsible thing to do? I smiled, cradling the delicate frame of her innocent jawline in my open palm. Sweet child, I began. Sweet innocent child. There are so many ways in which such a sum could be tactically deployed for the greater good of the community, both locally and more broadly. Last year in this country, 14 million people had to visit food banks just to put a meal in their children's tummies. And right now, 100,000 children in England and Wales are classed as homeless by the local authorities. A single salty tear rolled down her angelic physog. Oh, Daddy, her voice gently trembling, whatever can we do to help those poor, disadvantaged, huddled masses? Let's make Con Air, biatch! Even discounting the fact that $75 million in 1997 money equates to about 118 million clams now, and I know because I checked, there is no compelling reason for Con Air to ever have been made at any price north of zero, for it is quite the most ridiculous, overblown and disgraceful misappropriation of funds and time as Hollywood did ever barth forth. The first Jerry Bruckheimer produced joint following his split from Don Simpson, which is ultimately a moot point anyway, as the latter had fatally imploded into a cocaine singularity before filming began. As a calling card, Con Air functions very much like a live hand grenade. I look at it as an alternate reality Forrest Gump, in which one of those whimsical life decisions didn't work out quite right, placing us right at the start of this movie, where Nick Cage's monosyllabic Army Ranger Cameron Poe kills a man in self-defence out back of a bar, landing him in chokey. Here he befriends McKelty Williamson's Baby-O, writes letters to his infant daughter who he's yet to meet, and does some insane cell-based workouts over a number of years, and the opening credits, before being bundled onto a convict air transport pending his release. Would it that it were so simple? As besides Poe and Baby-O, the flight's passenger manifest is made up of the most notorious murderers, rapists, cannibals, psychopaths and other Republicans the US has to offer. And, of course, they brutally seize control of the plane in a bid for freedom. In a bid to give Poe any reason whatsoever not to ghost the out of there at the first opportunity, of which he has several, it is necessary for Baby-O to be missing his insulin, making McKelty Williamson's second outing as plot fodder for the white saviour archetype. Colm Meaney's unhinged Fed Malloy wants to do the sensible thing and down the plane, while John Cusack's other Fed, I don't remember, Vince Larkin is intent on doing the morally correct thing, deducing that Poe is not just your ordinary crim and may be down to help him save the day by recovering the aircraft and quoting philosophy. To try and explain much else about Con Air would be a sheer folly, as nothing that happens makes any sense, and it does so incredibly loudly and incredibly violently. An impressionable 18-year-old at the time, I remember thinking this insanity was the tits, and bizarrely, for something so forthrightly trashy and hostile, it remains a favourite of my pension-aged mother. I, however, have shifted ever so slightly in recent years, and upon recent review I can confirm that this is in fact deplorable, artistically bankrupt garbage, as Scott would pronounce it. To rub salt in the wound, this movie has the temerity to open with a misquotation of Dostoevsky. I believe what he actually said was, the degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its cinemas. I don't know, this is another blow to me, because at last viewing I remember acknowledging that Con Air was a bad movie, but that there was something to enjoy about it, and this time round I acknowledged that it was a bad movie and there's now nothing to enjoy about it. Am I alone in this?
Oh, it's very much a film that's cranking hard on the stupid dial. But I think maybe like Drew, what you were saying earlier before we started recording this, I'm not actually convinced I'd watched this all the way through. I know I'd definitely seen it all in some combination, but I don't think I'd ever sat down with the intention of watching Con Air from start to finish. So this may be my first complete viewing of it. And I didn't hate it, but it's really stupid. I mean, aggressively stupid. It's a script that is so stupid it almost goes like buffer overflows back into clever again.
Violently sociopathically stupid.
I mean, it's a film that raised the ridiculous bar so high I'm not sure there is a bar anymore. It's a film where John Malkovich threatens to shoot a stuffed rabbit in the head, and somehow that makes sense in context.
And for some reason, audiences laughed along.
I mean, almost everything in it's actually quite pedestrian. I mean, the action's probably okay. It's competent, but not earth-shattering. Probably disgracefully so, given the amount of money pumped into it. But really, the only thing I watch this film for, and it would get very tiring, I think, on repeat viewing, would be the performances, which are mental. It's like a cast-wide scenery chewing competition. Nick Cage may possibly win it with that accent, which is probably racist. It seems like it should be racist. It's certainly offensive to most thinking people, as is all of the dialogue. It's a very stupid film, like really, really stupid. I feel dumber having watched it, but I still kind of enjoyed it. No! I certainly have no interest in ever coming back to it. Again, it's just one of these things. It's an artefact of an era that's been more or less forgotten, or the good bits of it have been excavated and done better in more recent films. This, as you say, is sort of the death throes of that Bruckheimer cinematic universe, where everything was got as loud and as dumb as possible. Echoes of which perhaps remain in the Transformers franchise, but has more or less kind of been
phased out,
sanitized in other films. Yes,
it's we're faced with a terrifying prospect here, because it was part of that. There was a trifecta of Bruckheimer movies that Nick Cage did, of which The Rock is clearly the high watermark, or I would assume is the high watermark of that. I don't know. I'm terrified to go back to it now. And the least of which I think we would probably agree was Gone in 60 Seconds, but I'm not so sure now, having watched Con Air. We are faced with the prospect that actually, if we were to go back and watch Gone in 60 Seconds now, I'm genuinely terrified that film might have worn better than this.
The one with Vinnie Jones was.
Yeah, it's like
Gone in 60 Seconds, so that's a deep cut.
This is ludicrous, but it's still less ludicrous than Fast and the Furious, so yeah, maybe it wins.
Yeah.
No, you mean
this makes some concession to physics.
The Fast and Furious film, which is now gone full on into magic.
Yeah.
And sci-fi, with Idris Elba apparently being some evolution of humanity with magic back. No, I wish I hadn't seen the trailer to Hobbs and Shaw, because I thought this will be fun. Those two guys get it, but no, everybody around them doesn't. You're talking about that sort of that time period, Craig, and because there are a couple of films from around that sort of time that I've had great enjoyment for at the time. One of them was, in fact, The Rock.
The other's not Face Off, is it?
No, I dismissed my feelings for Face Off quite some time ago. I had enjoyed it at the time. No, the other is Armageddon.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Which is the same year as this, I think. 97 or maybe 98, but certainly around about that time.
Yeah, as good as.
Both of them I watched again within the last 5 years, I think, and will never ever watch again. It's like, these are rubbish. That's disappointing. I used to like these. Con Air, I suspect, would have gone in there had I seen it in the past. Now, I like Scott, actually. I didn't dislike it. I found it for the most part reasonably enjoyable, while still being fully aware of, boy, this is stupid. This is very stupid and distasteful in many ways, and stupid, but...
And what gets you is it doesn't stop being stupid at any point for you to realise how stupid it is. It just keeps going. It's a very driven film.
Yeah.
and if you've not seen it for a long time, or you're not completely familiar with it, I think it kind of gets by on that for a while until you get to the end and go, wait, hang on, why was he going to shoot the bunny in the head?
Yeah, but also they tried to set up things as being sort of reasonable and then immediately undercut them too. Like at the beginning of the film, they're setting up the fact that there were no weapons on the plane apart from one in the cabin, and there were some in the hold.
Yeah.
And then you see where the guns get. There were shotguns. Okay, that makes sense for prisoner transport for prison guards and stuff. There were assault rifles. I'd accept some sort of rifle, but why did they have grenade launchers? Why?
those surgically precise weapons.
just what you want inside a plane.
Totally not designed for collateral damage.
I believe it's standard prison issue, apparently. But
clearly so.
And then there's more kind of conventionally stupid things, like Meany's agent just being, an asshat for the reason that they needed to have an antagonist to John Cusack's character, but nothing they did or said was in any way reasonable, and it's just I don't know. I would never ever watch it again, but I didn't particularly resent my time with it. The biggest problem I had though is it has the oddest tonal changes. Like, it's really odd tonally, because there are bits where people are being threatened with rape, to the point where Danny Trejo's character almost does it to Rachel Ticotin, but then he gets stopped and there's like retribution for it. Then at the same time, Steve Buscemi is suggesting he might be able to rape a child. It's ambiguous whether in fact
Rape and or murder. Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing not, because she waves at him, but it's really not clear. But then, while Danny Trejo gets murdered in the film, or some way killed, the film ends with sort of John of the multiple murderer and people eater, who at one point said he was driving for several hours with somebody's head as a helmet, as a hat. The film basically ends with a wee jaunty bit of him having escaped and going, I feel quite lucky, and a wee jaunty bit of music comes in. This film is crazy.
It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. It's interesting. See, when you watch this now, if you mentioned Rachel Ticotin's character, Drew, she is the only person who behaves like a functioning human in this whole film. No one else is relatable on any level.
Yeah.
Any level. I remember it must have been... God, it was a while ago now. It's probably before even I moved down here, so it's probably about at least 15 years ago or something. I remember watching an interview with John Cusack on some film programme or other, and on the topic of Con Air, he's like, no, I don't talk about that film. And I remember at the time, and like, right, and pressed on it, he's like, no, I've no interest in talking about Con Air. And at the time I remember thinking, wow, what an arrogant prick. Now I'm like, yeah, I would, man, I could have a good chat with John Cusack over a beer.
I don't know, I'm kind of thinking John Cusack's made a hell of a lot of films where I'm not talking about it, that would be the appropriate response.
Yeah. Oh, he certainly has since then, but I can appreciate why, just sort of like Con Air, it's like, yeah, look, I took the money, don't ask me too many questions about it. Because in that situation, I'm sure we all would have taken the money, and we all would have looked back on it with some sort of, artistic regret, if not financially, because I'm sure everyone was remunerated handsomely, which explains the presence of Malkovich at a time before he was kind of trawling the bargain basement bins as well. Yeah. He was still an actor at that point who had some sort of cachet and who was very much gave the impression of being holier than thou and would only appear in material that was worthy of his presence. And this was the first time where I sort of saw his billing in something and thought, wow, this must be a semi-serious action film then. And then sat in the cinema thinking, wow, John Malkovich must have had a dump truck of money turn up outside his house.
Yes, turns out everyone does have a price.
Yes, exactly.
I think there are hints in here, though, of the beginning of Malkovich really beginning to play things quite kind of ironically, and sort of being aware that what he's in is daft.
Yes,
that his role calls for that, at least.
Yeah, you certainly get that from this. But I don't think anyone is really taking this in any way seriously. I mean, Cusack is probably the one person who's taking it the most seriously. He seems to be playing his character as though it's a proper character, and everyone else is just going mental with it. I mean, even Cole Meany, I mean, he's so unreasonable. He's just unreasonably over the top for the purpose of the fact that he's in Con Air, and he must have read the script and went, well, this is a piece of garbage. I may as well act my tits off. As most people
screaming about John Cusack saving the rainforest and something as if... That's maybe like author insertion. I think that's horrible lefty liberal nonsense, but it's...
I do wonder if that's why Cusack feels he can't talk about it, because he seems to be the only person who's not in on the joke. The joke being that we've wasted this amount of money on a film. Yeah, it's stupid. I don't know if that's anything to do with it, but yeah, he seems to be the one person who's trying to be serious in a film where everyone else very much isn't.
Yeah, a film where like nobody understands even like the basic idea of diabetes. He's not had anything to eat for many hours. If you give him insulin now, you'll kill him, not save him. But okay. And then, I don't know.
I don't know that. I'm just an army ranger.
I'm not sure anybody's paying attention to what was actually in the script, because they have things like the drug dealer, who's supposed to be some incredibly fearsome guy who murdered many people on a yacht just to protect his identity, or protect him being caught.
We've all been there.
It's some sort of weedy wee guy. For the small bit he's in, he's a weedy wee guy who's entirely deferential to John Malkovich, despite the fact he's paying him as supposed to be some big time drug dealer. It's just, there's no cohesiveness to this film at all. And that's such a minor thing, but it just kind of it's a symptom of the whole thing. And Malkovich perhaps comes out of it best for being the one person who gets it more than anybody else. I think this is double. Have a wee bit of fun here and get a nice paycheck. But yeah, I think probably you're right, Scott. That John Cusack is the one person who's thought, well, this is a serious role. I'll take this seriously.
I can ground this in reality. Nope.
I mean, I've turned up on set and heard Nicolas Cage's voice and looked at Nicolas Cage's hair and still thought, I'm wearing sandals with a suit. But no, I'll go with this.
This Bruckheimer guy knows what he's doing right.
This is the first time I feel like a producer has really understood me. Oh my days. Oh my days. So much of it is confusing. so much. And that's before the BBFC took the entirely understandable decision to insist that they excise many of the scenes which seem to poke fun at the cross-dressing convict who's on board, whose name I can't mention now, but who we see very little of in the
Sally
UK.
Can't Dance.
That's it, Sally Can't Dance, who we see very little of in the UK edit because it was deemed, even in 1997, the treatment of that character was deemed unacceptable. And there you go. I for one can't say they were wrong on that.
I assume I've seen the Blu-ray version of it, so it will likely have been done cut version now. But that's the character's not in it much. But while at the point where most of the people are trying to rescue the plane so that they can escape, which makes sense. Nick Cage is off trying to find a syringe so he can give a dose of insulin to his friend and make sure he dies. But he at least thinks he's doing the right thing. And it seems like the really pressing thing for Sally to do is to go and find a dress, which conveniently he does. But that seems to be the important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ever explained to us what Sally Can't Dance's crime is, other than perhaps Sally was in jail for being a man dressed in women's clothing. Seems like the sort of decision that they would make.
But thank you for saying that. Talking about explaining what the crimes is, that's something it's really awkward for watching this film, though, is that the way they do the exposition is so awkward and clunky. And not you'd expect anything better from this film, I think, but it's done almost like they have the character speaking in the way that a narrator might. It's so awkward, and it doesn't just happen at the beginning, it keeps recurring through it. And so I'm surprised they didn't find some sort of way to explain that person's crimes, because they did it for everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And perhaps in that, just acknowledging, or there is some acknowledgement on their part that it was a bad decision to have that character in the first place anyway, but they went ahead with it. Yeah, and that's the other thing about this, is that at times it borders worryingly on glorifying some of these characters, which is just absolutely, bizarre. And, well, presumably it was done with tongue-in-cheek, but I just don't think that's a good idea to begin with. So
the whole thing, again, I'm going back to the tone, so I'm just thinking too, that you've got, I mean, while he's more than anybody playing it kind of knowingly, but John Malkovich is portrayed as capable, dangerous, scary. Then you've got Danny Trejo, who's a threat in the film, and you have Steve Buscemi, probably the one person not playing up who's probably more capable than anybody else of doing it, but at least he's portrayed as like really dangerous guy, and he's delivered in his Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, I thought he was a wild animal kind of thing. Yeah,
and then there's Dave Chappelle goofing about. It's strange. Yeah, it's a very, very mixed up film indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I can almost guarantee that if I went back and watched this sort of next year and then the year after, I would quite rapidly be swinging towards your position, Craig. I don't think there's a lot here that will stand up to any kind of repeat viewing, but I was basically coming to this for the first time. It had been so long since seen it, I'd kind of forgotten everything that was in it, apart from vaguely thinking about Bunny, and that kind of gave it a bit of leeway, but it's certainly not going to stand up to any kind of scrutiny whatsoever.
No.
Yeah, I have no doubt you're right where to return to Scott, but I have no intention of doing so.
No, probably for the best.
Enough of that in one viewing that it's like, you know what, I didn't feel this film particularly wasted my time. Enjoy, maybe a strong word, but didn't resent my time with it. But I'm never watching this again. It does not stand up into like one viewing, let alone repeat.
No.
5 stars, says Paul Ross.
Paul Ross, 5 stars.
High octane thrill ride.
What do our listeners have to say about the topic?
So, at Sonic Yoda on Twitter, I agree entirely with what he's saying here. It's still amazing to me that cast all still agreed to do Con Air. Also, the
Here
sequence.
comes another dump truck of money.
Also, the sequence with Steve Buscemi's character and the little girl is genuinely one of the most nerve-wracking scenes in an otherwise incredibly stupid movie. Yes, I certainly agree with the last half of that. Yes, yeah, and again, that's more what you're saying with the tone, Drew. Is that's a scene from a much better film that has been put in there amongst this sea of garbage. It does stick out like a sore thumb. But yeah, yes, I agree. Very stupid.
Just, I was thinking too of how terrible the film largely is and how terrible John Cusack is it. But I'm thinking that it's only just a couple of years before John Malkovich and John Cusack would be together in a film again, and it would be brilliant and possibly the last good thing John Cusack ever did.
Yes.
What a waste.
You're talking of 2012, of course.
That's it, with the lava speeds up to follow them because the Latinos have mutated.
I was going to say, didn't Malkovich play a mutating neutrino?
He went method.
Gino the mutating neutrino. Dearie me. Did we get any other feedback?
Just props out to @Tingushi on Twitter for the lovely gif of Nick Cage and his hair sniffing the sweet, sweet smell of freedom with that goofy expression as he tends to have. But otherwise, no comment. So I don't know if I take that as a positive or negative. I'm going to assume positive because why not? Yes, but that's your lot for us.
Yes.
That is your
Thankfully.
lot.